This week on the Eye of Power podcast, it's my great pleasure to welcome Paul Kirby to the show. You're going to find out fairly quickly that Paul is absolutely brilliant and very accomplished. He's an artist who went to Harvard Business School, had some experiences that, fortunately for the world, connected him to what was true within himself, the passions that he has, and he's lived that for 30 years now and has accomplished so much. You'll be able to see in this discussion, as well as you have to follow the links. You have to buy his book. You have to find out some of the magic because I think it has all the power in the world to help you do the same for yourself. So let's get right into it. It's a long talk with chock full of goodness, and I can't wait to get to it. So welcome Paul Kirby to the show. Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I don't know anybody who has done anything like what you have done in the world. So I feel like I'm going to learn a lot just in the next however long we have together. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
And just to orient people who might not yet be familiar with your work, fusioneering, my layperson's understanding of it is marrying of art and technology together in a way that produces something that apart would never really happen. Am I on the right track there, or can you expand on that, Paul?
Yeah, you're on the right track, but it's bigger than that. Let me just explain.
Please.
Fusioneering is about identifying your passions, what lights you up, what excites you inside, what makes you tick, and then merging those or fusing those into a vision, and then following that vision, following that passion. And I call that the fusioneering pathway or the fuse pathway, and we can talk a lot more about it. So in my case, it was combining technology and science and art and robotics, because those are the things that I enjoyed, and I fused those. And then I had 3 decades of following that. Let's say you're a young person and you're good in English, and you like writing, and all your classmates graduate, and you work weighted tables to work your way through college, and they all started jobs, but you didn't know what you wanted to do, but your passion was writing. But then you're young and you're adventurous, so you want to travel. So a real simple example of fusioneering is become a travel writer. And I can expand on that a lot more as an example, and I have other examples that they're in the book also, but that you can use. So you were
Excellent.
correct, but it's broader than that. Can be anybody with passions.
The fact that you're connected to that broader picture intrigues me even more because it makes it a universal concept
Yeah,
that anybody
right.
can use. Obviously, we feel good. Our emotions steer us in the direction of our passion. Our imaginations take us in the direction of our vision. What, in your view, Paul, stifles that process or fuels that process, that either for yourself or for people in general?
I like things that are simple. Like Elon Musk boils it down first principles. And so I'm not comparing him to that, but there's a fascinating word called autotelic. And I don't know if you or the audience is familiar with it, but it's
Autotelic
autotelic. It's from Greek, meaning auto is self, and
self.
telos is goals. And so it's self goals. And so it means you're motivated and driven from what's inside you, what you want to do internally, as opposed to the opposite, which is external goals. And so that would be fame, fortune, more money, more recognition, etc. Those are external goals. And so I think that those that follow autotelic reasons for doing things are going to be more fulfilled, because the other ones are artificial to who you are deep down in your true purpose in life.
Well, I love that. In the Eye of Power model, this quadrant here is called the purpose quadrant, and we talk a lot about connecting to first meaning and ultimately fulfillment. And you're speaking the language that we like to talk. So let's get into it. What do you think of if somebody is pursuing something that is, let's say, not autotelic. And usually that comes right from a place of wanting to not disappoint somebody you love, perhaps a parent or guardian, or doing the expected thing, or perhaps not having a developed self vision. What's your view on that, Paul, as to what people can do to make sure that they're moving in that more fulfilling direction?
We're always going to have external factors to deal with. You want to pursue this autotelic vision, but you have a family to support, a wife and kids or whatever. And so there's always going to be a compromise. But
So it's never really an either or type.
no, I
Or
mean, that's not the real world.
yeah.
But I think that if you were to combine your passions into a vision and follow that vision, you're going to be a much more self-fulfilling person all along the way, and less frustrated and less in doubt of what am I supposed to be doing in life. The Japanese have a word called ikigai. I don't know, are you familiar with that?
Not enough to be
Yeah,
intelligent about it.
it has an unusual spelling.
Let's
I
hear it.
K
What's the
I
spelling?
Ikigai, and the I's are pronounced E,
Yeah,
Ikigai, and it
ikigai.
means doing what you were born to do. And the people that live on the Japanese people that live on the northern part of the Okinawa island all live by Ikigai, and they all live around 100 or more. And it's
Hmm.
their way of life, and it's an English way of saying is do what you were born to do. And another, Eastern way of thinking is your dharma. What is your dharma in life? What is your purpose in life? And so when you're following your purpose, it's in the autotelic world. So I could be a real person that wants to be a caregiver. In fact, I saw my doctor earlier this week, and he's past retirement age, and we've gotten to know each other over the years. And I says, are you going to retire? But he really likes helping people. So it's an internal autotelic, but it's external in the sense that he's helping people. Okay.
Hmm.
But he's also a third of his, I'm in Colorado, a third of his patients from like the East Coast and elsewhere. And he's a Lyme's disease expert. And so let's say you have this guy, Bill, and Bill was an introvert in school and loved science and technology, and he's working in a lab to find a cure, a quick medicine cure for Lyme's disease. And so he's driven autotelically, but it's internal. He's not interfacing with other people, but he's doing it for other people. So his purpose in life is autotelic for this, he's a chemist and biologist, etc., medicine guy, and he wants to cure Lyme's disease. So you have two extremes. They're both living autotelic, and one is with people kind of once removed, and one is directly with people.
So there's many paths,
Yeah, yeah. Because in
and
one of your podcasts, you talked about the greatest reward is connectivity. And so the quiet scientist is also connected in his own way.
yeah, absolutely. Really curious about your personal path because it's a very unusual one. You've manifested some absolutely stunning material works. What's your view of your work and how you got where you are?
Well, I could approach that from many angles, from being a kid all the way
Yeah,
forward.
just give you a little light questions to start with here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as a kid, I was always curious, and I was, preschool. I was always playing with my erector set and using my hands and building things, and that kind of. And so, if the robot's behind me here, it's not here, but I'm in my house, but in my studio. It's 10 feet wide, 10 feet tall. It's fully automated, and the brush dips into paint, paints all over the canvas, washes the brush, changes colors, and it's fully automated. I come back in the morning and see what my robot's name is Dulcinea from Don
Dulcinea, I
Quixote.
love
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, he's chasing windmills, and that's what I'm doing. And then he needs a fair maiden to. Yeah, someone said to me once, "Well, why don't you sign your paintings?" This is a side story, and I said, "Well, I didn't paint them. My robot painted them." And he looks at me, and I said, "Yeah, I didn't paint them." And so then I realized that in order to do a signature, I have to have a name. So I thought about it, and I came up with Dulcinea, which is in the book, and she's a wench in a neighboring village, and in his eyes, she's this fair maiden.
That's
So,
right. That's
so
right.
my
Yeah.
robot is hardworking, never complains. Like one
Perfect.
One of my paintings is that yellow impressionistic pointillistic one is like 45,000 brushstrokes. It took nonstop like 3 days. She never complained. And in my eyes, she's this beautiful maiden. So anyway, Dulcinea. So besides the things that I did growing up and my proclivities, in my second year of grad school, I took this self-assessment test, and it asked like 100 multiple choice questions. What would you like to do on Friday night? Or who is the greatest person? And it would rattle off 5 names, historic names, etc. And then I got the results back, and near the bottom was clustered four things: social, religious, economic, and political. And then up much higher was aesthetic. And then way up, which was a total surprise. And then way up higher was theoretical, which wasn't a surprise. I have a double E degree from Cal Berkeley, for instance. And so here's this Harvard MBA second year, and I don't need power and money at the bottom. And what do I do with, aesthetic, and what do I do with theoretical? And, and I'm supposed to, anyway, so I'm walking across this footbridge. It was October 23rd, 1977. So you can tell I'm an old guy. And I'm on my way to 6 p.m. Mass at St. Paul's Cathedral just off of Harvard Square. And right on the middle of this footbridge, I had this idea of combining them. And then also the idea of a robot, technology, science, and art. And I didn't know anything about art. But then, like all my classmates, I graduated and went into the corporate world. So that was kind of one of three epiphanies to answer your question of how I got to where I am. And so then 17 years later, I'd been an army brat and I had a lifelong friend, Lars Sulivarius, in Copenhagen. He says, "Why don't you fly over and then we'll drive down to Austria and ski." And so when I landed, he said, "There's this Leonardo da Vinci museum show traveling around Europe. And we can, before we leave for Austria tomorrow, we can take the ferry over to Malmo, Sweden and see it." And that's what we did. And in there, everybody knows a little bit about, Da Vinci, but in there were all these wooden replicas or models of his invention, his mechanical inventions and stuff. Plus, there was a notebook and a, protected stand, and he painted two of the most famous paintings in the world, the Mona Lisa and Last Supper. And I came out of there, I was so excited, I
Wow.
said, man, that's what I want to do. So I came home from, skiing, and I was living in Boulder, and then Loveland is a large art community. It's the sculpting capital of North America. And so I moved to Loveland and I was able to get a studio, and then I started. And so that was the beginning of building a robot and taking years of art classes and workshops at the same time, kind of building it all up. And then one of my favorite expressions is I was a happy hermit in a hobbit hole. And so for 25 years, I just loved going to work every day and then always working on the next painting. And a painting could take months or years, because there's a lot that goes into it. People would come into my art studio and they'd see all my oil paintings that I did when I was learning to paint. And then they'd see me building this robot and they'd say, "Paul, why don't you just paint? Look at all your oil paintings. They're wonderful. Why don't you just paint?" And I would say, "Well, if I just painted, then I couldn't do all these other things that I love to do. I couldn't work in the machine shop. I couldn't write code. I couldn't play with my robot. I couldn't do, all these other things." And so then I came up with a way to satisfy people in a polite way. And let's say you really, really love apple pie, but you also love vanilla ice cream. So who says I can only have one or the other, and put them together? And then even better than that, heat it up and have hot apple pie a la mode. So I don't have to just paint. I get to do all these other things that I enjoy at the same time. And so that's an example of fusioneering. And it came from the expression came from a different story. But so I don't. Why don't you just paint? Because I can do all these other things also. And then what happened was, as these darn kids show up, and I had these class of gifted fourth and fifth graders and their teacher, and then I had another group of at-risk high school kids, and I could never have anticipated the intensity and the pure exhilaration and excitement that they experienced in my studio, and it really shook me up. And so then I realized that I've been given gifts, and it's time to give back. And so I came up with this four-word expression, which kind of summarizes everything that I'm doing, and that's to share what I've done, to excite and inspire others, to follow their own dream, their own pursue their own vision, their own pathway, and then just use me as an example. Like, look what that son of a gun, Paul Kirby did. If he did that, this is what I want to do. And so I'm just as an example, not literally.
Wow. Man, I love that. That's phenomenal. I have so many elements there that just pop out to me. The idea of doing an assessment that really gave you some clarity. I do that. I use psychometric tools in my consulting practice. It kind of functions as a mirror, and sometimes people do get some insights that are very profound for them. So the fact that you got it at a pretty young age like that, and you're able to sort of, if I understand what you were saying, it seemed like it might have shifted your thinking as to what the trajectory of your career might look like. Did I catch that correctly?
Well, yes and no. I went into the corporate world, and it wasn't until 17 years later that I really
Yeah,
started seeing the Da Vinci Show. I mean, I was, Harvard Business School's West Point of capitalism, or it used to,
right.
so the idea is you work your way up in the corporate ranks. And so I was successful in that world, but it wasn't, it was like Andrew Agassi was considered one of the greatest, tennis players of all time, but nobody knows, but he hated tennis. He absolutely hated tennis. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's what you should be doing for fulfillment. Yeah, he had that
Wow.
in his biography. Anyway, so I was good at had a successful career in the corporate world, but it wasn't tied to it is tied to those bottom of my list of things, political and
Well,
economic.
the theoretical is the feeling rewarded by knowledge itself. In other words, people high in theoretical will feel fulfilled if they're just learning.
Right.
Whereas if that's low, it's not that they don't want to learn, it's that they need to learn to accomplish something else that is important to them. It's not the knowledge for knowledge's sake. So that high theoretical means you're feeling fulfilled as long as you're taking in more, your expansion of your view of the world is getting bigger. That's that you feel that reward. If we're using the same kind of terminology there, could be.
Well, I think that those six criteria are only relative to themselves. And as an example, what would you like to do on Friday night? And one would be read a book, go to a movie, or play poker, or have a party, or go to a dance, or whatever. And so they were kind of real simple questions. Who's the greatest person? Albert Einstein, Albert Edison, and then Gandhi or something like that. So that would
Yeah.
cover the religious. And so, I mean, they're really simple. You didn't have to think. You ding, 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 ding.
Right, right,
And
right.
so I'm not sure um, if theoretical was as deep as what you're saying or more on the technical side.
Okay, fair enough. Well, and then you also had the aesthetic, which obviously was a correct diagnosis. You
Yeah,
know,
and I didn't. Now, interesting, I didn't know that. And
yeah.
that's we can get into how do you find your passions. I have some real neat tools that are in the book. Skills, things you can do in the book. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know that because I hadn't done art until what your second grade or third grade or something like that. My mom oil painted, and I watched her paint, but that was about it.
My theory, and I'm curious as to your opinion on this, is everybody is an artist. It's just a question of what the medium is. I went into more onto the music side. Couldn't draw very well. I never really thought I could do anything in terms of the fine arts. And I think maybe that's just something that like I could have been taught and learned and been able to do better. But what I'm wondering is the expression towards art seems to me pretty universal. So let's get into that area that you're talking about in your book, perhaps against the backdrop of what might be universal as it relates to artistic expression, Paul.
Well, I got kind of two directions or threads I could take that down,
Okay,
and then
pick one and maybe we'll do both of them.
yeah, and so more direct to the first half of what you were just saying is there's an art school across the parking lot. My art studio, there's 14 art studios in a row. It's called the Loveland Art Center. And there was a school there, Loveland Academy of Fine Arts, and people would come from all over the country to do a 1 week workshop. Plus, you could go like 10 weeks in a row for a half a day a week, in a classroom situation. And so I was fortunate to be able to study under two of the top recognized oil painters in the country, Richard
Cool.
Schmidt, who died, I think, a year or two ago, and then David LaFell, who's still alive. And independently, they would say that art is acquired. And as an example, there's never been a child prodigy in art, whereas in math and in music there has been. And so
Oh,
that gets back to you. So they would say it's acquired. And my current art mentor, I've been to Europe 10 times now with him, studying the masters in the famous art museums. And he will tell you also that there's never been a child prodigy in art. And he teaches drawing, and he does work. He's 88 now, or 87. He goes all around the world giving 1 week workshops. And that's how I was in Europe so many times with him, going into the famous museums. And so it's acquired, and it's one of the things I like, because maybe that's a theoretical in the sense that you're talking about. I'm a sponge when he's in a museum and giving lectures, and then we're outside on a bench and he's lecturing on how to do field sketches. Field sketches are like you have a sketch kit with water and ink, and you're grabbing a scene, in just a few minutes, 5, 10 minutes is a field sketch. And so it's acquired, and then the more you do it, like some things, either you like it or you don't. And if you like it, you're just going to keep doing it. And for me, it's that sponge of the theoretical and the arts. I mean, I can talk about different art periods or artists for hours. I mean, I love it. That's other than robotics, and maybe even more than robotics. It's my favorite subject. So it's acquired. Now, a totally different way to think about it is we talk about this in the book. The IQ is a lot of people think of IQ as how smart you are, and but there's a different whole model of IQ, and for everyone listening, it's going to give you a lot more satisfaction because the person that formulated this had come up with 7 IQs, and then he added 2 more, so there's 9 IQs, and so the two you think of is math. Okay, and that also includes logic, ability. And so in my case, it's, I had straight A's in math in high school and college, and programming. I do, the iceberg is in the painting is the code behind, underneath to create the painting in the robot or the computer that sends it to the robot to paint. Another one is a language, so that's English. So those are the two kind of, tests that you see in school, math and English. But
yep.
then, as you said, an IQ is music. Okay, and then an IQ is visual, and it turns out that I took a test once, and I didn't know this, but I scored 20 out of 20 as a visual, and so
Wow.
so I'm visual, and then kinesthetic motor skills. So that's Andrew Agassi. He's gifted at 3 years old. He was playing tennis, and then there's interpersonal skills and intrapersonal skills,
Yep.
both affecting people directly and indirectly. The last two were existential and love of nature, like
Okay.
a parks ranger would qualify that, or a hiking guide, something like someone that likes being outside, even a farmer that wants to be outside. The nice thing is, it's like I had trouble in Latin, which is the English part, but if in high school, but if I had flashcards, then my grades in Latin would have gone way up because I'd learned how to learn. And
Visual.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I was always in the back of the book looking up the Latin word because I couldn't remember what it was. But if I had flashcards, then lever. So the nice thing is, my math ability or my music ability is only relative to me. Okay, it has nothing to do with the external world. It's not I'm better or not as strong as this person. It's myself. And so once we describe these briefly in the book, or you can look them up, and then you say, yeah, that's me or that's not me, and then you can kind of grow up and feel what is more natural for you. And there's great insight into that, great power.
I am absolutely loving this because purpose quadrant. One of the things that I've kind of incorporated in the I Power model, Paul, is the idea of taking a personal inventory of the attributes, the capacities, the proclivities that we have. I always say things like, you might not be the smartest, you might not be the most charming, the fastest, the best looking, the tallest, whatever metric you want to choose, but there is a combination of attributes that you have that is unique and irreplaceable and super valuable. That's just you. And our I think part of our mission is to discover and cultivate and put those things to service to other people. That's pretty compatible with the things you're talking about there. But what you just laid out for us is what we tend to do with let's call it the Prussian model of education, is we tend to test and then put people with labels and pigeonhole and put expectations along those lines and steer into societal expectations. If this is all valid, which it sounds like it is to me, that is the exact wrong way. What we need to do is find the beauty and potential for each unique individual and figure out ways to unleash that. What's your view on that?
Yeah, because you started out by saying I'm not as good as this or I'm not as good as that, and that's all
Yeah,
external measurements,
right,
So
right.
if you're autotelic, you're being true to yourself. You're following your own passions and your own pathway, and the comparisons are irrelevant.
How do you kind of navigate society, elegantly rise above the conventions of comparison? What's your view on that?
I was thinking of this earlier today. I'm going to give you a two-phase answer. One is a
Okay, beautiful.
story. Yeah, one is a story, and then the other is this. The second half is once you have your vision, that's where you want to go. And the fascinating thing is, I have I want to get into a guide to how to go about finding your vision and how to go about pursuing it. I want to get into that, and you've seen that in my material. But um, once you have that vision, you just do that. You don't care what other people say. A neighbor's husband, we have open houses for the studios, and a neighbor's hut, she's an artist, and her husband came over and he says, "Why don't you sell your paintings?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to." I mean, honestly, a painting could take 3, 4, 5 years for me, to develop all the code just for one painting. And so I said, "I don't want to." When he got mad at me, he's like 3 times, "Why don't you sell your painting?" Well, that's external. I mean, I don't need to sell my painting. I'm already retired. I've been retired a long time. And so I'm doing it. I'm doing the next painting because I want to do it. That's autotelic. Okay, so I was a ski instructor for many years in Vail part time, and another ski instructor. I don't tell people, but I have now that I went to Harvard Business School, and he had a client that booked him for a week every year named Bill, and he knew that the two of us had gone to business school together. So he invited me after he skied, at the bottom of the mountain after skiing, to go meet his client named Bill. And so it's just a courtesy to my ski instructor. We're all in the same locker room, so you get to know each other. There's a lot of camaraderie in the locker room, and where you change clothes and get your skis and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I met Bill, and he's a money manager in Boston, and very wealthy and very successful. And almost at the beginning of the discussion, he says, "Paul, how much money do I need to retire?" And I said, Bill, you probably already have enough money to retire. You just need to know what you want to do next." And so then a year or two go by, and then I'm having lunch with a client up on the restaurant on the top of the mountain, or the middle of the mountain, whatever. And the instructor sees me. He says, "Oh, come over and say hi to Bill." And Bill's sitting there with his family and like 3 or 4 instructors and grandkids or whatever is there. And he doesn't even say hi. He says, "Paul, how much money do I need to retire?" And I said, "Bill, you already know the answer. You just have to know what you want." And that went on a third time, maybe a year or two later. And so he collects art. My friend told me to collect art, and I'd love to talk art with him, but art was just a measurement for his wealth, and he didn't really, it was just a measurement. And so, he's kind of bankrupt in a way because
Mm.
he's not following what he wants to do. He's looking at external measures of look how successful I am. And so that gets into, being true to yourself and finding your own purpose. So my purpose is I'm a quiet introvert, and I want to cure Lyme's disease because it's a dreadful disease. It's totally debilitating. Or
Yeah.
I'm really good at medicine, but I really like people, and I want to help people. So there's different models, but you're doing it from for internal reasons. And Bill's doing it externally.
The comparison game is of the external uh,
Right, right,
side. So if
right.
if you're in that game, you need to shift your focus to the internal motivations. Is that your answer?
Yeah, I mean, because you'll never be happy because you're not addressing who you are. You know, I want to
Yeah.
collect stamps, or I just want to collect stamps, or I love gardening. Like I'm just making these up, but I love, here's my backyard here. I just love gardening. I mean, that's autotelic. I'm not doing it. My neighbors can't even see my backyard, but I love it. So that's autotelic.
There's a universe in there. When you're first telling me about Bill, I thought he was like kind of playing some sort of game with you, with each asking the same question each time. But he was so, if I understood correctly, he was so insular he could only think in one direction. He
Yeah,
couldn't even
yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
wasn't even in a position to actually learn.
No, and he wasn't a friendly guy. I mean, we have the common bond, like because we went to the B school together,
Yeah,
and so, but there wasn't small talk or anything like that. He just drilled right in and asked me because he
yeah,
knew I was retired, and then maybe he wanted to do one-upmanship on me or whatever. I don't know,
sure.
but they were always short conversations, and they're spread out over a few years, but they were the same each time. Anyway, I just use
Yeah,
that because he doesn't have that vision. He hasn't done the what makes him excited. What's his ikigai in life? What's his purpose in life?
yeah.
Because making more money is not I mean, it could be a purpose in life, but there's levels of nobility or, majesty in what you want to do.
Well, there it's an empty pursuit, right? Because there's never enough.
Yeah, yeah,
You never get to the
right,
place if
yeah,
it's external to you. There's no amount of whatever it is you're chasing
right.
that's going to ultimately satisfy your thirst.
Yeah, so I want to kind of take off on segue on what you
Please.
just said. So that implies that so when you're pursuing your passion, in my case, making the next painting, which is months and years or whatever, there is no end, there is no goal, because the goal is the doing of it. The whole way along this fusioneering journey that we're still going to get into, you're living your dream all along the way, and
Mm.
that's an amazing an awareness, an amazing gift to yourself. There is no end point. Some people were
Yeah.
do a documentary film on me, and they should have known, and because they'd read the book, and they said, well, what's the end point, what's the goal? And so they totally missed it, because I'm doing what I want to be doing. Why would I want to do anything else?
So yeah, so unless people can kind of understand this viscerally, it's mysterious because the magic's in the now, right? The magic's in today, the present. Otherwise, you're putting a bunch of energy worrying about a future that you don't have a lot of control over, or regretting a past that you can't change. It's happened, and so the magic is the here and now. And by being in that internal place, it allows you to be present in that moment in the everyday. Somebody else said recently that the legacy is what you're doing today. It's not off in the field. It's like it's a daily thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's compatible with the wisdom you just shared, Paul.
Yeah, so I want to, for your audience, kind of talk about the today, but in two ways to think about it.
Please.
Well, one is the doctor I just saw. He was the chief medical officer of all of NASA, all of aerospace. The space stations, including the Russians, the cosmonauts. He has a fascinating background.
Wow.
And so being president, there's kind of two ways that are almost the same. One is where you're doing something linear. I want to be an architect, or I want to be a nurse or caregiver, and that's kind of linear. And what I'm saying is that people will often have more than one passion, and but society and education, steers you, and jobs steer you linearly down one course. And so what I'm proposing and offering as myself as an example is you can also fuse your passions and pursue that. Okay, let's go back to, we'll call him Noah, and the travel writer. And so he likes writing, and he has a few blog contracts, and he's saving his money to be a travel writer. And so while he's saving money and waiting tables, he's writing and developing his writing skills, and he's researching about being a travel writer. And he's always been fascinated with South America, and more particularly Brazil. So he wants to go to Brazil, save his money, go to Brazil, and write some articles. And so think of a stool, and your vision or your goal is the seat of the stool. And so he has two legs. He wants to be a writer and a travel writer, so travel and that. But then he realizes to get the in-depth articles he wants in Brazil, the nitty-gritty ones, he should learn Portuguese. So he added a third leg to his stool, and he's taking classes in Portuguese. So now he's off in Brazil, and he's working his way up the career ladder as a travel writer. And he realizes that I could be even more effective if I added photojournalism. And so he just
Mm.
added a fourth leg to his stool, and he's upgrading himself, and he's evolving. And so but the whole time when he's learning Portuguese, or he's learning about writing and he's learning about photojournalism and Photoshop, he's living his dream the whole time. He's happy the whole time. He's self-actualizing. He's doing what he was born to do, and he's being adventurous and traveling. And then he says, "Well, there's other countries down here. I better learn Spanish." So he's off upgrading and evolving even more, and continuing down that path.
That's terrific. So, um, what you point to there to me is the idea of being sort of satisfied where we are, but also recognizing that we're works in progress and that we should be in the business of expanding and learning and growing. But you gave it a nice direction where that seat that of where you want to be, identifying that without that vision, it's hard to know what legs to try to add, right?
Yeah, and so I want to come back to helping people find out what their vision is, what
Yeah.
their find is, but you use the word should. So in the autotelic
Ah,
word, there is
thank
no
you.
should.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I shouldn't learn Portuguese. I shouldn't learn Spanish. I do it because I want to do it,
right. Yes,
because
that's a good
because it's
catch.
going to give me a better article.
Good catch. Yes.
Yeah,
Because the should means that there's something that I'm imposing from
yeah,
external, right?
external. Very good, Tom. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, okay. So, yeah, so let's go back to that. Let's go back to what you
Yeah.
teach.
So because of the kids and this thing, this desire to share what I've done, excite, inspire, and inform and motivate people to follow their own dream, I formulated this fusion or fusioneering framework. And the book's called The Fuse Pathway: How to Find and Lead a Fulfilling Life. And so the first of those, FUSE, is find. So this is what I'm really excited about sharing with your audience, because this is so powerful. You can kind of sit and try and brainstorm your passions, and that's one way to do it. But I wouldn't have ever put down an aesthetic or visual, and it turns
Mhm.
out that in ski instructing, we learned, as a member of Vail Ski School, and then also the National Association for Ski Instructors, that, clients on the mountain have four ways they like to learn. And so one is thinking, feeling, visual, and doer. So I have this family at the bottom of the mountain, and they booked me, for the day or whatever. And so we're going up the chair. And so there's five of us. So I'm sitting next to the father, and we get to the top of the mountain, and then I say, "You see that blue sign way down there? So for our warm up run, I'll go first, and then one at a time you go down afterward, and I'll meet you at that blue sign." So then we're all there at the sign, and I say, "Well, tell me about your run." And the father says, "Well, I thought about what you said on the chair, and I tried that." And the mom says, "I just watched you ski down to the sign, and I just did what you did." And then the daughter said, I was thinking about all the weight on my outside leg. And then the younger teenage brother said, "I just skied." And so those are your four. So you listen to the verbs,
Wow.
and I'm going to refer to this in a minute. So you just listen to the verbs. So the father's a thinker, the mother's visual learner, and then the daughter is a feeler, what we call a feeler, and the son is just a doer. Now, I always thought that I was a thinker and then a feeler, and there was a couple hundred of us or 300 of us in a room, and we took 20 multiple choice questions and then graded ourselves, and I graded 20 out of 20 visual. I would never have guessed that, so I was dumbfounded. But it makes sense, because in my studio I got paintings on all these walls. I got two galleries, and I got like 6 rooms that got paintings that are hanging on all these walls. And so that's the visual. And so knowing learning styles is really helpful. So now how do you find it? So one of the exercises that's so powerful is you pick an episode in your life and you just write about it. And you're the only one that's going to see this. So however you want to write and just freeform it. Don't worry about sentence structure and all that kind of stuff. Just let's spill out this episode, whatever it is in your life that you remember, and then pick another one and then write about it. And so you're building up this collection of nuggets, and then you pick another episode, and then maybe you go back to early in life, like me and my erector set, and then you just keep working up through every 5 years. Pick something in your life that sticks out. Now here's the magic. Then you have this collection of nuggets, and you get a yellow marker, and I'm kind of still a paper guy, but you use a yellow marker on Word or whatever, and you underscore all the verbs. And it turns out that's who you are. And in my case, the same verbs percolated through all my golden nuggets of mini stories, and it was the same, and that's who I am, and that's what I'm doing today. It's the same as what I was doing as a kid. I built a ham radio
Wow.
set, and I was doing Morse code in 8th grade. And so, electronics and science technology, and I was in an Air Force research lab, and it was always the same. I was building stuff for the Air Force and getting patents for the Air Force and stuff. And so it never changed.
Wow.
Yeah, never.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Wow.
and it's so simple, but it takes time and effort to make your mini stories.
I'm glad you said the stories because, that really is the components of our consciousness is our narratives, our story. We think in story form. We can never really know the real world. All we have is our perceptions. So, right. So we're always continually trying to make our stories more useful, better, better in the sense that we navigate more elegantly. And this tends to be the struggle of life. Sometimes we have a sour story, not sometimes, a lot of times, we have some sour notes in our stories that provide us headwinds that keep us in place, that we continually bump our heads against the same bar until we do an exercise such as you just. I mean, right here, that what you just shared right there, that to me, we gotta, I gotta put up a paywall and have people pay for that because that is so valuable. That's if you don't do anything else from what Paul just said, do that and your life is going to be better for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah. I
fantastic,
mean,
and that's just one. That's the find piece, right?
yeah, that's the fine, and that is so powerful. And the verbs, your yellow verbs, are going to be consistent. There might be one or two, but you're definitely going to see a pattern because it's who you are.
Yeah,
I mean, mine was just over and over again. Maybe a different expression of it, but they were the same verbs. Yeah,
it's amazing, and those patterns are really important because they're like a sign, right? Like a evidence of seeing yourself more clearly, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And but you have to put in the effort.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, that's not something you just sit down
Yeah,
and do
because
for.
it can't be superficial because you'll never. And what's nice is you don't worry about it because nobody's going to see it or read it. You just write, and
Mm.
you don't worry about the verbs. You just describe. Well, when I was young, the family went to vacation the West Coast and Oregon and being on the beach, and I really liked the smell of the water. Whatever, you just write, and then it'll all come together later. Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's
that's fine.
incredible.
So that's
That's
fine. And
fine.
then coupling that with being aware of those IQs I said, and so that's kind of secondary, but it's helpful. Like if
Yeah.
I'm going to learn Spanish or Portuguese, having learned from Latin, I'd use flashcards, for instance, because I'm not, that IQ is language isn't as strong as visual, for instance, in math. And so the rub it is visual and it's math, the computers and okay, so
That
that's
help that helps us find the modalities of our expression.
yeah, yeah. And so the next one is upgrade. And so I'm going to give you three examples that run through the book, and we already started on the first one. And upgrade is fantastic. I love talking about this. I love talking about all of them, but and then the audience keep in mind is you're already living your dream. Once you found my vision of fusing robotics, art, and science and math and computers and And then, I didn't know anything about machine shop and working with metals, so I took a VOTEC class on, machine shop skills. So that was a leg of my stool. And so that's upgrade. And so you might have things that you already know a little bit about, but you need to know, like maybe I know a little bit about Portuguese, but I need to improve my Portuguese or my Spanish. So you want to upgrade. But then in my case, I had to add so many legs to my stool. I didn't know how to paint, so that's a leg of my stool. I didn't know how to make machine shop parts to make my robot, my wrist and all that. So that's the upgrade. And so Noah is upgrading, and then there's two other characters that go through the book, that go through this upgrade phase. But we also have iconic images in each of these four phases. And so one of the it's interesting. Not many people know that Leonardo da Vinci, when he was young, his father took him to Florence, and from Da Vinci, which is this little village where he lived. And he had a mentor, Verrocchio, and he worked in Verrocchio's studio not until he was old enough to go out on his own, but he stayed with Verrocchio for several years after that before he branched off on his own. And so who would have think of Leonardo having a mentor, but it's a true story. You can look up Verrocchio. And so anyway, so we have those. And then I want to back up. So, because Maya Lin is an example in the book of someone that fused. And she was a senior in college at Yale. And she had to do an architecture. She was an architecture major, and she had to do a project. And so she did this project, a scale model like they do. And so
Okay.
she did this model, and then she submitted it, and she won the contest out of thousands of people, and it was for the Vietnam War Memorial. And so she went
Wow.
on, and she wrote this beautiful book called Boundaries, because she wanted to combine architecture and art. And the school said you can't do that. You can only be one or the other. And she was so frustrated. And then her third leg of her stool was the environment, and in protecting the earth. And so that was her fusion. And
Wow.
yeah, so art and architecture, because they are two different disciplines if you're strict. But hers, when you look at her monuments and things she's done around the country, you can see the blend of all three. So then after you've done upgrading, I've added photojournalism, and I've added Spanish and Portuguese or whatever. Then you can start. And you can start earlier, like the writer, he can start right away. Now there's something really important about start to understand, and is that, like, when I got back from Mora, Sweden, I started on a knife edge, but I was already been retired and I could afford it. But Tom is in the book, and he wants to start, but he has a family and two teenage daughters to support. So he's going to start gradually, and I can tell you what he wants to do, but he gets a job on the weekend in this new field of his. Well, I'll tell you, he was a data cruncher in this big company in Denver, and he was bored. He was good at it because he likes math. He's good at math, but he was bored, and he wanted something else in life. And
Mhm.
he remembered his favorite elective when he was in college was his favorite class was an elective, and it was architecture. And even had a girlfriend, and he visit some market, even pay entrance to the Louvre, for instance. And so he loved architecture. So he had math and he had visual, and he grew up fishing and being outside. So he liked that other IQ of being outside and love of nature. So he had the idea to become a landscape architect. And but he didn't know anything about that. But he had those three IQs and those passions. So that was his fused vision. So then he got a job on weekends during the summertime. The girls were off to camp and stuff. So he got a job on the weekends working in a local nursery. So then he got to know the landscapers, the customers, the owners, and this and that. So he's bootstrapping himself up. So then in Start, he's doing it gradually, and he meets in the book he meets this older gentleman that has a landscaping business that wants to retire, and they became friends. And then he gradually did a buyout and worked for him for several years and did a buyout and graduated. So in the book, James Cameron wanted to make Avatar, And but Avatar technology, this is in 1995. The technology wasn't there. Jurassic Park and all that were there, but the facial capture that he wanted to do for Avatar. So he went off and made Titanic, and he got done with that, and the technology still wasn't there. And then he had this R&D development contract to do the CG for the facial emotional expression capture that he wanted, and then he went on and did Avatar. So his start was delayed, and then the R&D development, and then finally he was able to start doing pre-production and production of Avatar. So start
Wow.
is not just a knife edge; it can be designed and tailored with thought for your own situation. In my
Right.
case, there was a 17-year lag between when I had the idea and then when I saw the Da Vinci show, and I said, "This is what I'm going to do." And then the next one is evolve, and that's the phase I'm in now. And so Noah, the writer, was evolving because now he's adding video to his capture. Also, he has photojournalism. Now he's adding video capture. And so he's continuing to evolve. The architect loves water because he's always fishing. And so he's adding goldfish ponds and water fountains and stuff to his landscape designs. And his customers are loving it because he's good at that. He's passionate about that. And that's another leg to his stool now. So he's added water features, waterfalls and fountains and goldfish ponds and stuff. And so evolve is you just keep going. And in my case, I'm always raising the bar, working on the next painting, and that's what excites me.
The lesson from the start element of things, I think a lot of times we're either impatient or we have some things that perhaps we are that comparison that we say, oh, we're not far enough, or people might be looking and commenting, well, you're always talking about this, always doing this, why don't you do something? Or there can be noise in your system. So it seems to me like in all of these four elements, we do need to have some sort of faith and self knowledge that says, I see myself clearly. I trust that what I have, what I'm passionate about, and what I'm visioning is worthy and real. So I'm wondering how you tie all that
Yeah, yeah,
together.
yeah. So you're using adjectives that are tangential. So
Okay, so still from the outside,
yeah,
trying to.
worthy and some of those other ones, but
So I'm just going in
but
terms of what I'm trying to explore with the question is the things that might stop people. So it sounds to me like your answer is, well, you're just external. As soon as you go external, that's where
no,
your stops
no,
are.
no. I want to be a landscape architect. That's my passion. Or, I want to work in my lab for Lyme's disease. I'm only mentioning Lyme because I talked to my doctor this, 3 days ago. And, when you're following your passion, in my case, I want to work on the next painting, and the neighbor's husband says, "Why don't you sell your paintings?" That's external. That's not fulfilling. If I sold a painting, I would feel sad because then I don't have that painting. It's one of my
Mm.
children. It simplifies life. Autotelic simplifies life, and you're going to have tremendous problems. And I never had a bad day going to work in 25 years, but I had overwhelming problems, technical problems, or whatever that I was faced with. But the whole time you're on this fusioneering pathway, you're living your dream, you're living your ikigai, you're living your dharma. Now there's one thing I might add that'll help you in what you were saying, and the listeners, is that if you combine your interests, it doesn't have as much kilowatt power to get you through the rough spots as combining your passions. That's an important distinction. Oh, I like this and I like this, I'm going to put these together. That's not going to get you very far because that's not deep enough from inside you to take you through all the turmoil and the hiccups. I like to use the word puddles on your pathway, and then the sun will eventually come out, but you got to have persistence. And persistence comes from, and enthusiasm comes from living your dream, following your passions. So Noah, he's not a language guy, but he's happy learning Portuguese
Mm.
because that's what he wants to do, you know. And so you need to dig deep, find those passions, because that's the kilowatt power where interest isn't going to get you there. You know what I mean? It doesn't have the carrying
Yeah.
power.
Well, let's take Noah for an example, though. So he chose Brazil. Was there some sort of other um, interest or passion that came in for Brazil? Because he could have chosen Australia and just put the energy into
He,
something else rather than
yeah,
working.
he was fascinating with the Amazon for in the tribe.
Okay, all right. So that
For
was another
whatever
element.
reason. Yeah, so that element was the Amazon ecosystem and
Okay,
tribes and whatever. And he doesn't have to have a reason for that. It's
right.
like I like gardening. I'm not me personally, but I like working in my garden. I don't have to have a reason because it's autotelic. It's coming from within. So he's curious. Curiosity is a powerful word. So he's curious about Amazon and writing articles and sharing that. So that's his external, like helping other people. But he wants to share in his stories, about these cultures and ecosystems and stuff.
Paul, I got to say, this was a jam-packed. We're almost at an hour already. uh, jam-packed discussion that we've had. I can't believe how much wisdom you've thrown down in such a short amount of time here. Very impressed. So, um, thank you very much. I feel like I want to talk with you again because we barely started scratching the surface. But I know people can perhaps get your book and continue the exploration for themselves. Where would you say? How would you coach somebody to start moving in the direction if they feel so inspired?
Well, you can type in Paul Kirby on Amazon, and the book will pop up called The Fuse Pathway: How to Find and Lead a Fulfilling Life. You can also go to my website called thefusepathway.com, one word, thefusepathway.com, and you can go to Instagram, The Fuse Pathway, on Instagram. And so those three are good starting points. But if we're wrapping up here, I want to say that there's kind of three categories of audience that this is applicable for.
Okay, please.
Yeah, and so we talked about the young person just starting out, or maybe they're still in college and they want to know what to study, but they have these interests. So, Noah, the young writer, so you could be a young person starting out, or like the man that wants to do the landscape architect, he could be mid-career, and he could be like the stereotype, frustrated and burned out and, turned off. He wasn't that extreme, but, there's a lot of unhappy people in the world, and their
Mm,
problem is they don't know what they want to do or how to go about it. For
mm,
instance, I'm being general for that, but you know what I mean. And then the third is a person that could be really happy and say, well, maybe there's more in life. So another character in the book is Sarah, and she's 30 years old, and she's a very successful accountant in Seattle, and her parents were both accountants, and she's good at math, and she loves her clients. She loves what she's doing, as in this third category. And then she's invited to a girlfriend's wedding in a giant ranch outside Helena, Montana, 20,000-acre ranch. And then in the few days while she's there, she realizes all over again her passion for horses and large animals, like when she was young riding. And so then in the mingling, the bridal group and all that kind of stuff, she meets a vet, and the vet travels to ranches with their vet truck. And she says, man, I could be a traveling accountant, because some of these ranches are 1 and 2 hours from the nearest town, which is real. And, all dirt roads, it takes a long time to get into some of these ranches. And so she wants to become a traveling accountant. And then there's a whole story about how she upgrades and how she does that. So you could have a young person, a frustrated person, or a person just wanting more in life and saying, oh, I'm going to continue my accounting business, but now I'm going to be working around ranches. Yeah, so there's
It
three
occur
categories.
it occurs to me also that people that are sort of retiring too might need some sort of answer to fill perhaps a void. I know a lot of times it's the story is people retire and they kind of lose a little bit of the passion for life and then don't end up living as long as they thought they might.
Yeah, yeah,
They're just empty. They don't feel like they have that
yeah.
purpose or that fulfillment. Um,
Yeah,
so
there's no age restriction. I mean,
yeah,
you just say, in my case, I've kind of shifted gears to this sharing this fusion framework, this fuse pathway, and now doing this new book coming out and things. And I was recorded in an interview, sit down interview last week, etc. And so I'm not able to work on the painting. So I'm kind of doing two things.
uh,
But my true passion, in all honesty, is doing working on the painting. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well, I'll include the links for the that you mentioned, as well as the other things that you sent me, and because people have to see Dulcinea's work. They have it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And the VR tour, you told me you saw the VR
I
tour.
did, yeah,
Did
it was
you zoom
incredible.
in on a painting? You can
I
keep
did.
zooming
I was.
in. You
It's
can keep.
what I take now. I have a very developed eye for art, so I'm as layperson in this as I think you can get. But I don't think I've seen anything like it. So to me, that immediately makes it interesting and valuable because it's putting some. Maybe there are things I just don't know, but to me, to my eye, it's just like a whole new kind of aesthetic that I've never really um, witnessed before. So, uh,
Yeah, and you can see the glorious brushwork of the robot
yeah,
as well as the color. So just an just
right. There's things that people can't do, right? I mean,
well, I mean, yes and no, but
okay.
um, if you go to the major art museums of the world, like my two favorite is the National Art Museum in London, and then right behind that in my ranking of art museums is the Tate Britain Museum, and you go look at their VR tours, and they're so bad they're embarrassing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
really embarrassing. And I just recently looked again at the tape, and one is done by Google, and it's so bad it's embarrassing. Where this is like a whole different level. For instance, when you go into a room, the room is 57,000 pixels around. It's a JPEG, but it's a circular JPEG, and so like, a normal peg is 3, 4, 5, 7, 10,000 pixels wide. So 57,000. So that's why you can zoom all the way into the thermostat and have it fill up the whole screen and be razor sharp. Yeah,
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 it's really something.
yeah. And then
So
you
yeah,
click on a painting, you keep zooming. Then there's all these documentary films. There's three on the robot, and then there's some on the painting, and then the paint room just on mixing colors for my last painting. Yeah. All right.
wow, so it's just absolutely incredible stuff, and that's to me some of the beauty of life is as people live out this fused vision is the kinds of achievement and expression. It's as wide as our imaginations can take us, and to me that kind of gets close to the point of the whole thing. So
So, well,
thank you so much, Paul.
this has been fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, I saw how much fun you and Amber had, so I can't worry about our podcast. I knew we were going to have fun.
I just generally don't worry about it. When I select somebody to interview, it's because I know that there's going to be some gold in the conversation, and I want to learn from them. I feel like if I'm learning and I'm growing myself, it'll be valuable to anybody listening to the conversation too. So that's kind of what I learned a ton from you. Learn and clarify because a lot of our lessons are really more bolstering things we either underappreciate, forgot, are neglecting in some way in some one of our constructs. And so these kind of conversations and this kind of material for people, I think, is super valuable to help us continuing to mature in a productive and a fulfilling sort of direction. So um,
Well, Tom, let me ask you a question because,
please,
obviously with that diagram there, and especially with your four levels, you're a deep thinker about all this. But kind of my stuff is, it's not superficial, but it's simple. You know what I mean? It's just kind of,
yeah,
it's just kind of there.
and power and simplicity. I love that
Okay,
aspect of
okay,
it. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
What was the question?
No, that was it. I mean,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well, so it's funny because it is. I mean, so that chart there is the model of the eye of power. And in the beginning, when I started working with it, I was tempted to try to explain it and give people sort of deep explanations of each of those 16 sectors and why they're there and all that. And that's maybe interesting to some people, but it's not super useful. The usefulness is the things that we do, the decisions we make, the conversations we have as a result of looking at an aspect of our of the model that we're using to navigate. So the program we currently have that's coming out now called the Mentor Machine, we use the model, but not in an overt sort of explanatory way. It's more prompts that prompt people to make decisions of actions they're going to take this week. I call this sustained incremental action. So something you're going to do, and then you don't do it by yourself. You do it with a growth partner. So we do it in organizations, and we're moving towards making people um, move in a direction that's kind of more psychologically healthy, in the sense that they're getting self-knowledge, getting past things that are keeping them in place. I always ask people, you ever make a New Year's resolution and then not keep it? And people will, of course, mostly be able to say yes. Well, some of that gets to what you were saying about, if your resolution is external, good luck with that. Right? You know,
Right.
but
Right.
so there are good answers to that. But what I recognize is that positive change is not something. Well, first of all, we don't know our own blind spots, right? So we need people. We need each other. We can't see what we can't see. We can't change that which we're unaware of. So we need each other. I think that's a beautiful aspect of things. And then the other thing is, even when we learn, it doesn't necessarily make us change, because we're moved by our emotionality. So it's really through relationship. And so that's what's so the structure of program is always through relationship and conversation, and then you're you're deciding, okay, as a result of this, I'm doing something slightly different, and so I'm getting used to moving out of a comfort zone or a pattern, and then having a partner to help me do that as I do it. So it's less explaining and more doing. The
Gotcha.
model's just sort of the flashlight and the guide that helps us decide,
Right.
okay,
Right.
this is what I'm going to pay attention to for now.
Right. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
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 So
Well,
anyway,
good luck with it. Good luck
thank
with
you
it.
so much. I'm excited about it. I got partners, we got some programs going. It's getting fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Eh,
you're doing it for internal reasons, and it's autotelic for you. And
Oh, I'd say for sure, because
yeah,
it's what I
yeah,
think about all the time, and
and you're
nobody
excited
told me
about
to
it.
do it.
That you're living your dream. That's
Absolutely.
your stool, and then you have these legs that's supporting it. Yeah.
That's it. And I could relate to, like, when you're telling the stories of the characters in your book, the I can relate, because I feel fulfilled, even though, I don't have a huge income from it yet. It's in its baby form, but I still have the same fulfillment as though if it was just, it doesn't even matter what size it gets.
Well,
So
that's brilliant because that's affirmation of it doesn't matter where you are on that pathway. You're fulfilled all along.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the people that I get to work with, I feel very fulfilled with, and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, I feel very much. It only took me 63 years to get there. So
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parallels in what we two of us have been talking about. Yeah.
absolutely. Well,
All
Paul,
right, Tom. All right.
very nice to get
Yeah.
to know you a little bit,
Yeah.
and
You
I
too.
feel like we could keep talking a lot. So. Well, that was a doozy of a conversation. Thank you, Paul, so much. Appreciate it. And I'll just tell you, after I paused and we did that interview, he and I spent another good half hour plus just talking more about things. And I love it when I have these introductions and I find new friends. And I was telling Paul, I don't think I've ever really met somebody quite like him, and he's given us so much in such a small amount of time. So I'm going to listen to it again, because I have to edit it, so I get to listen to it again. But you might want to listen to it again too. He put so much down. The fuse formula, just to put a fine point on it, the find, and he schooled us through some of the ways that we can find. Um, Both are the types of IQ that we think of, getting past whatever limitations you might be putting on yourself right now, either consciously, unconsciously, the way that we learn the thinking, visual, feeling, and doing, and then sort of that discovery piece of ourselves. In the fuse, the next one, the U, is the upgrade, right? So that we're works in progress, we're adding on, we're upgrading. Start means you're doing it, right? And it doesn't. He used the term knife edge, so you don't have to. Doesn't have to be before and after this, just this everything all at once, but we can move in the direction as are the circumstances of our lives allow. And as we do that, we start getting the benefits of the autotelic element of our lives, really expressing what's real and true within, where we get our deep satisfaction, and then finally evolve, where just because we've started and just because we're doing doesn't mean we're not open to the new, to the expansion, And all of that is so powerful. He highlighted curiosity and visioning and all these sorts of elements that I think are very important. But I'm going, for my personal takeaway on this conversation, I'm going to say that distinguishing between the external and the internal. And I think that's one way that we can really get out of some of the traps. Is this goal, is this thing we think is important really ours, or is it something that we're doing because of something external to what is real and true within us? And I think that's a very good way for us to just kind of self-examine and look forward. So thank you again, Paul. Thank you for listening to us, and we'll see you again on the iPower podcast.
This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me, simply email Tom at dardickcommunications.com.